A massive thanks to all the people who supported the previous video where we were making a case against the aiming mechanics in Elisa and how the free aim system in general is not really a good choice for fixed camera angles. I got some interesting comments in the comment section about how the earlier patches of the initial Resident Evil and initial patches of Resident Evil 2 had a similar free aim system, except without the reticule, of course. And yes, fair and fine, this may be true, but it was patched out in later versions for a reason. So as much as people were coming in with these anecdotal or these exceptions to the rule, I mean, if the actual Resident Evil developers decided in later iterations of the game that that free aim in a fixed camera angle perspective is not good, and therefore patched it to become auto aim, shouldn't that actually be argument for my point that free aim in fixed camera angle is a bad choice because the creators of the damn genre removed it themselves? Even they could see how stupid it was. So to all the imbeciles and dumb people in the comment section of the previous video, I would like to say hello, nice to meet you, and you are as stupid as you sound. So moving on, in this particular video I'm going to make up a small little discussion, and I'm going to make a case against padding in video games. So maybe someone may wonder, what do I mean by this? What I mean is as follows. At least in the past, early 2000s, the 90s, 80s, there was a lot of experimentation as to what developers could make in the gaming atmosphere, to say the least. So you got a whole lot of variety of games, and also these were generations that were coming off the backs of the arcade. It wasn't so much about home entertainment systems, but it was more so about the arcade experience, developers making the best arcade experience they could make. And when they do port it to the home systems, it was trying to get and make the best arcade-like experience for the home systems so that there could be some sort of parity between the two experiences, arcade and home. This was the DNA, the blueprint of gaming at the time. And of course, games development, though it was still expensive in comparison, even then, you know, if you adjust for inflation and value of currency, it was still expensive to make games. Maybe it's more expensive now, but it definitely wasn't a cheap endeavor back then. But still, developers were still willing to experiment. I guess maybe it was also because of the fact that developers were still trying to figure out what consistently sells all the time. Things were still novel, things were still new, which means there was uncharted grounds to discover, you know. And as we moved into the mid-2000s, going into the 2010s and onwards, it became pretty clear which business practices made the most money, even though these same business practices were frowned upon by at least a significant number of the player base. That's the time we live in now, where game development is more so about the numbers for the company, more so than creating a good experience for the player through and through. It's understandable. These are now multi-million-dollar companies, multi-million-dollar video games. To run a loss, to run a Concord is something you wouldn't want to do as any developer. So people are not taking risks anymore, and it's sad because when you have had the experience, for example, like I have, of many different generations of gaming, you can really see the difference in video games and how it's affected the quality of the video games. These days, maybe due to the lack of novelty or just sheer experience of having played games for so long, it's very difficult to find those games that still ignite that spark where you're like, wow, this really was an amazing game. Recently, just a few days ago, I remember finishing Plastomorphosis, and it gave me that feeling where it was like, wow, this really was a nice game. Developed by one person at their own time. It was a really good experience. I was playing Diluvian Ultra. really nice experience. You know, these games, not big games, not amazing games, but at least they tried their best to have something enjoyable about them. In comparison, maybe a few weeks ago, I played Plague Tale Requiem, and I was thoroughly angry, disappointed, and frustrated with that game from start till I rolled credits. There were just so many things that I didn't enjoy about that game. But that is the product of AAA corporation, multi-million-dollar business gaming. Most of these AAA titles are like this now. And these smaller indie titles are the ones that are still trying their best to, you know, bring about something interesting. You know, the games like Fear and Hunger, for example, amazing stuff. But anyway, in general, the case I'm trying to make in this video, moving from here, is that padding in video games is not a good thing, even though it has been something that has been used to market video games in general. When I was talking about the arcade experience, one thing you have to understand about those times at least is that a developer had to make a game that was so captivating from the beginning. When you insert your money into the machine, you had to pay to play. It's not these days you pay to win. You know, most games are even free, altogether free to play. But if you want to have a chance of winning, a chance of having the good equipment in the game, you have to pay for the battle pass, for the season pass, for the character pass, all these different things. You pay for them for the chance to win. That's the model we live in now, the pay to win model. But back in the day, you had to pay to access the game. You had to pay to play. Each try, each day you entered the arcade, you had to invest money to even play the game, or you could just sit and watch others play. It's totally different economy, you know what I mean? And back then, the developers, in my opinion, had to make a game so captivating that as soon as the player inserts the coin, they are greeted by a game that catches their attention, first of all, keeps their attention over a period of time, has a lot of, this is a very key word, has a lot of gameplay density, such that the player continues to engage the game, and each time they engage the game, they are learning and appreciating the game more and more with time. That way the player keeps paying, because if I experience a game once and I've paid for that session, and I died, I ran out of lives, if there is no gameplay density, if there is no variety, a high skill ceiling, and intricate systems that are interesting, why would I come back to play again tomorrow? If all my tokens are finished today, why will I pay for this experience again tomorrow? If the game is shallow, I would just experience everything in one day and move on to the next game and never come back. It's as if the roles have switched. When development moved from pay to play towards play to win, there was also a switch in gameplay density towards maybe something I could call gameplay sparsity. These days, unlike the arcade days, you have a lot of video games or a lot of developers where they are marketing how many hours it takes to finish a game. For example, going from Witcher 2 to Witcher 3, one of the selling points is Witcher 3 has over 50 hours of gameplay, potentially hundreds of hours of gameplay if you really want to experience everything. Many other developers were following this trend. Our previous game was maybe 10-20 hours long. Now 30 hours or 40 hours or even 50 hours, 100 hours, 500 hours. You will never stop playing our game. It's understandable because that's where the market was. The money was not being generated by repeated play. How they're generating money now is how long can we keep a player in game so that we can run ads and DLC to that player. Because subconsciously, I would believe for most people who buy or purchase a game, they want to finish that game. There are some people, there's a vast majority of people who never finish what they buy. It's true. It's a result of this new big economy. Because the games are just not so engaging anymore. But generally speaking, I would like to believe that when a person buys a game that has an ending, they would like to see that ending. They would like to work towards something. There has to be a final goal. There has to be a reason why we're playing a particular game. If it has a story, I would like to see that story from start to finish. But the thing is, let's compare. Since we're no longer in the pay-to-play situation, the pay-to-play economy, how then can the developer continue to make money? Because in the pay-to-win economy, where we are now, once a player pays his $60, $80, $40 for the game, whether he plays 1 hour, 1 minute, 1,000 hours, 10,000 hours, their money that they have paid is fixed. That's it. For example, once upon a time, I don't know. Let me think of a game. Tekken 8, game I'm playing. I had to pay $60 for Tekken 8. Right. Of course, adjust for region and regional pricing. But generally speaking, people paid about roughly $60 or $80 for Tekken 8. Whether you buy DLC or not, whether you engage in DRM and DLC content, you can pay $60, only play one character out of the however many characters. You could play that game, Tekken 8, for 1 minute, 1 hour, 100 hours, 1,000 hours, 10,000 hours, and never pay any more money than $60. But the hope from the developers is that if we keep on marketing to you, and if we continue to stretch out the game, if we continue to stretch out the content of the game, instead of packing it in all at once into this one dense package, if we spread it all out, if we make it more sparse, sprinkle a little bit of gameplay elements here, sprinkle a little bit of patches over the next 2 years, sprinkle a little bit of new character releases, sprinkle a little bit of new stage releases, sprinkle a little bit of new content little by little after every 6 months. It means that the players are forced to keep on coming back to get the rest of the content as it's slowly distributed over a very long timeline. But then if you look at each point of that timeline and get a cross section, what is available is very sparse. This is the same for story games. Compare Mass Effect 1 to Mass Effect Andromeda. Or compare Dragon Age 1 to Dragon Age Inquisition. Dragon Age Inquisition is what I believe is a fair representation of what gameplay padding is and why I hate it so much. It comes in many different forms. If we look at Dragon Age Inquisition, this is my definition of gameplay padding. With Dragon Age Inquisition, generally speaking, you're going around your main character, similar to what happened in Oblivion, Elder Scrolls. Your main character has been chosen to close these magical portals that have opened and are pretty much bringing in demons, darkspawn, into the world they live in. And of course, if they don't close the portals, they will be destroyed. So there's an objective. Close the portals before the big bad comes to destroy us all. You are the chosen one. You are the only one who can do it. Fair, simple premise. Now, how does the game go about doing this? The game takes the world map. There's the country that the game is based in, Fantasyland. And this Fantasyland is divided into sections. Each of the sections has its own portals that must be closed, and each of its sections has its big bad that has to be dealt with. That's perfectly fine because it means that developers can create markedly different gameplay experiences in each of the sections. Maybe in one biome, there's a certain type of enemy, there's a certain type of story that's unfolding. You go there, you engage in the story, you engage with the enemies, you engage with the mechanics. It all comes to an end and it leads you to the next section, which has its own new unique story. That's perfectly fine. But then what does Dragon Age, or at least what do the developers decide to do with Dragon Age Inquisition? They decide to do this. In each section, they have the main objectives, and then they have meaningless side content. Meaningless. Bear in mind, you are the head of an Inquisition. You are the head top dog of an Inquisition of an entire nation. You have hired the best of the best to deal with the hardest situations that humanity is facing. But yet, even if you complete the main objective of a section, in this section there is a demon that must be killed and a portal that must be closed. Even if I'm skilled enough to go and do that right away because it's a pressing matter, I cannot go to the next section until I reach a certain power level. Why? I do not know. The game has you have your character levels for your party members, and then there's a power level for your Inquisition as a whole, right? Maybe think of it as like your influence over the land, your how powerful things perceive you to be. But to fill up this power level, it's not about destroying the actual enemies. It's just about completing side quests and missions in general. So the head of the Inquisition gets side quests such as go collect 10 of these herbs, go hunt 5 rabbits for dinner, go and collect these stones that can be enchanted by the magicians in the Inquisition, go and get these 7 herbs that we can craft as antidotes for poisons in the Inquisition, go and clear these riffraff in this area so that the Inquisition can travel freely. Would a king be sent out of his kingdom to collect mushrooms? It doesn't even make sense why it's even there, besides to prolong the playtime of the game. This is padding. My objective was to kill the demon and close the portal. There's a story associated to that. A game with minimal padding will engage with that primary story, and all other activities service that story. So for example, the goal, defeat the demon, close the portal. What could be side quests that have meaning to this story? Go make treatises with other leaders to gain soldiers to fight with you. Go conquer a certain land so that you can have a stronghold against the demon attack. Not go outside and pick up mushrooms. And when you have 100 mushrooms, we can proceed. Why? Can we not fight the demon without 100 mushrooms? Why do we need the 100 mushrooms? These questions are not even answered. You are just forced to go pick up 7 flowers because the florists are asking for 7 flowers. Even if they need them for something special, maybe they need special herbs to enchant their blades to fight the demons. Why would you send out the king? Why not go send out peasants to do this? Oh, maybe because the herbs are in dangerous locations and peasants would be killed. That's fine. Send out the soldiers, send out the army, send out the lieutenants, send out the generals. Why is the king picking nettles in the garden? This is just padding. And I've seen this before in other games. So for example, I love the Yakuza series of games, but I hate how they always end. The Yakuza series of games, this is an open world game these are the types like GTA. These games are padding personified. It's part of the DNA of the game, so I'm not blaming them for that. But if I look at the Yakuza series and I look at the main storyline, not all the side quests and side stories that you don't even need to do to finish the game, which is a positive. In the main storyline, as you progress the main storyline, there will come a point where the game tells you there's no turning back. You're now going into the main end game sequence. And once you accept, you can no longer go back to do those side missions that you left undone. Every time you choose to proceed in this point, something switches in the gameplay. So you were always fighting mobs of maybe 10 Yakuza at once, 6 or 7 Yakuza at once, there was a fixed number of enemies per fight per section. Now that you are going to the final section of the game, you get these long drawn out fights. You're fighting 20 to 30 Yakuza at a time, and the stage, instead of having like maybe 3 or 4 fights, all of a sudden there's 10 fights. There used to be maybe 3 or 4 checkpoints per level. Now there's only 1. So if you die, you have to go all the way back and do it all over again. So it's as if, yes, it is to increase challenge, but also it is to increase the amount of time it will take you to finish the game, because you could just finish the game. The story could just wrap itself up because you have done everything necessary to see the end of the game. The game could just put you in an ending sequence that is challenging but keeps the pacing of the game, because the game already had pacing. It was already paced in a certain way. But then all of a sudden we must stop and prolong. Each chapter maybe took me an hour to finish, but then the final chapter is 3 to 4 hours long. Why? Nothing is ever explained. So I would like to see a return of gameplay density instead of gameplay sparsity. Instead of taking games and stretching them over hundreds of hours, condense them, make it as short as necessary and as sweet as necessary. Because if a game is interesting, engaging, and dense from start to finish, even if it's only a 5-hour, 8-hour, 10-hour, 15-hour experience, it will be a memorable 5-hour, 8-hour, 10-hour, 15-hour experience. Not every single game has to be 50 hours long. Why? People need to respect our time. Plague Tale Requiem was an 18-hour experience for me. Let me tell you something about that game. As much as it was an 18-hour experience, there was only actually about 9 hours worth of gameplay. That other 9 hours was just padding that really made the game drag on and become frustrating. Because it's like, why am I even doing this? This has nothing to do with anything that has been happening. I played Ghost Runner 2. Ghost Runner 2 took me about maybe 11-12 hours to finish. That was a 5-hour game. I'm sorry to say. Ghost Runner 2 only had mechanics and a weak story that could have serviced really well a 5-hour experience, or 4 hours actually. It would have been short, sweet and amazing, and I probably would have played it maybe 2 or 3 times, which would have still gotten me that 12-hour mark that the developers maybe wanted me to make. But instead, they forced me into a 12-hour length by stretching out that amount of gameplay that they had. They didn't add to the gameplay and make it 12 hours worth of gameplay. Instead, they took their 5-hour game and found a way to stretch it out until it reached 11-12 hours. And that only works to hurt the experience of the game. A game that is sparse in its mechanics and sparse within its gameplay will always have a foul smell. It will always have something wrong. It will always not leave a good taste in your mouth, and it will always not be memorable. These will be the types of games maybe you play once or twice and you never play again. You will remember that once upon a time I played Ghost Runner 2. Once upon a time I played Plague Tale Requiem, but really I never really played it ever again. But then the games that are dense with mechanics, dense with story, dense, the developers put effort to make everything really meaningful within the game. Those are the games people talk about for years and decades. We're still talking about Metal Gear Solid 2, Metal Gear Solid 1, Metal Gear Solid 3, decades after they released. People are still talking Resident Evil 1, Silent Hill 1, almost 3 decades later. And it's not because those games have amazing graphics or the best voice acting or amazing cutscenes. The gameplay, the storytelling, the pacing, the environment is dense. That's why these games are still played till today and loved. It's not just some archaic thing found in a museum. People are still engaging with those games. It's why fighting games have seen more criticism in modern times than they did in the past, really, because of this sparsity mentality that developers have. Slowly sprinkling in things over time to make you pay more over time. But the gameplay is not so dense. The mechanics are not dense. I hope this changes. And this is my case against gameplay padding.